LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the August 18th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the dozen best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which would be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. I actually have all five of the big five corporate outlets. NBC News Meet the Press is back after a month hiatus. So yesterday it was Sunday and it was Meet the Press. Why does it keep doing that? I'm sorry about that beeping noise, but as you can see from the video title, my main topic is, well, the big topic. Democratic Convention puts Kamala Harris on path to beat Donald Trump. Can I say that one more time? Democratic Convention puts Kamala Harris on path to beat Donald Trump. That's the title of the video, and that seems to be the way things are going right now, because there are two basic ways that the candidates are competing against each other. One is in terms of, character, personality, etc. Kamala Harris winning that one big. And the other is policy. And you'll see that I'm going to show several Republicans. Well, I'm going to show in my newsmaker clips, I'm going to show Governor Chris Sununu, as well as Senator Lindsey Graham talking about how Trump needs to stay on message on policy, quit the personal attacks, quit doing calling Kamala Harris dumb, questioning her race, talking about crowd size, get rid of all that, focus on policy, and Trump might win. But the thing is, when Trump focuses on policy, he still does really poorly. And that brings me to what I'm using as my political comedy clip. This is a rally in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, that Trump held over the weekend. And he started off saying that Kamala Harris was lying about him raising taxes. And then he talked about how he raised tariffs, which are, of course, taxes. And then he lies about who pays the tariffs. It's, if you put a tariff on imports, it's the importer pays the tariff and gets passed on to the consumer. So it raises prices for the people buying goods from foreign countries. That's how tariffs work. Everybody knows that, but Trump apparently, I wish that beeping would stop, but Trump is trying to pretend that's not the way economics works, because he doesn't understand policy. That's my point, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that political comedy clip from the weekend together over here.
Everything Kamala Harris says in her speeches is a lie. She gets up and just lies. I was watching her yesterday. She talked about all the taxes I was going to raise. I never said that. I'm lowering taxes. Yesterday, she got up. She started ranting and raving that Donald Trump wants to put a tax on gasoline, a tax on food, a tax on medication, a tax on clothing, a tax on every single thing that was ever invented. Your hat, he's going to tax. Your shirt, he's going to tax. He's going to tax your wife. He's going to tax your husband. And I'm saying, I never said any of that. They make it up. Here's the truth. Kamala wants to put massive taxes on American jobs and American industries. I want to cut taxes on Americans while putting tariffs on China and foreign countries to bring our jobs back home to Pennsylvania and to take in billions and billions of dollars. I'm the only one that ever took in any money from China. China was really hitting us hard, ripping us apart. That means many, many presidents. And what happened is I put a tariff on, then I raised the tariff. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China. And Biden can't, it's so much money, he's trying to rescind it for a couple of reasons. Number one, he got a lot of money from China. Didn't he get 3.5 million, 4 million? That they know of. But he got a lot more than that. His family made a lot of money with China. He wants to get rid of the tariff, but he can't because there's so much money they can't do anything with the budget. A tariff is a tax on a foreign country. That's the way it is, whether you like it or not. A lot of people like to say, oh, it's a tax on us. No. It's a tax on a foreign country. It's a tax on a country that's ripping us off and stealing our jobs. And it's a tax that doesn't affect our country.
Doesn't affect our country. It's a tax that doesn't affect our country, but actually, that is not the way that tariffs work. And the idea that the foreign countries pay the tariffs, that's just not the way economics uh, actually operate. Maybe Donald Trump knows that and he's lying, or maybe he doesn't know it and he's just really ignorant. But either way, that's a lot of misinformation. And did you notice there that there was this Chiron, the lower third from Fox News there says, I want to cut taxes and put tariffs on China, which is like the opposite of a fact check. He's like, no, tariffs are taxes. He doesn't want to cut taxes. He wants to raise taxes because he wants to raise tariffs on, it's actually like a 20% tax on all imported goods. It's almost like a national sales tax. Add 20% to the cost of anything that comes in from a foreign country. And Chris Coons was on Fox News Sunday and he brought that up. And Shannon Bream, the host, of course, could not really deal with it and said, oh, well, I'll be asking the Republican guest about that, which, of course, she sort of did. And I'm going to put those next two clips together with the one you just saw to make my point about the Fox News bias that you saw, like in this Chiron here. And it's also it's obvious from the questioning of Shannon Bream on Fox News Sunday, her response here to Chris Coons in this clip.
Let's talk about what we've gotten from the vice president so far. A bit of an economic rollout on Friday. Reaction, one of them post-speech, was this. The Times demands serious economic ideas, but Harris supplied gimmicks. They say her ideas would cost money, but the campaign didn't specify in its offsets its economic plan rollout. Without them, her plan would cost $1.7 trillion in addition to the federal deficits over a decade. They went on to say even adjusting for the pandering standards of campaign economics, Ms. Harris' speech Friday ranks as a disappointment. That's not a far-right appraisal. It's a Washington Post. They're not buying it, Senator.
Well, Shannon, one of the most important pieces of Vice President Harris's economic policy rollout this week was the announcement that the 10 most expensive prescription drugs, which have now had to negotiate with the federal government under Medicare because of a vote where she cast the deciding vote, legislation that Biden-Harris passed and Trump would reverse. It's going to reduce $6 billion in federal expenditures. It's going to save seniors $1.5 billion in out-of-pocket costs, and there's more to come. Her proposals included prescription drug price costs, incentives for housing production to make housing more affordable, support for the costs of childcare. Shannon, these are all things that middle-class working Americans are concerned about, and President Trump just this past week rolled out his proposal for essentially a national sales tax, a new 20% tariff on all imported goods. That would raise costs by thousands and thousands of dollars for every American. Remember, a tariff is paid by consumers. It's the equivalent of a new Trump tax. And he didn't offer any offsets or how to pay for that either.
Okay, we're going to talk to JD Vance about that coming up because it is something they do need to answer, this issue about tariffs. But on this issue of the prescription drugs, I think.
Oh, they do need to answer this question about tariffs. Oh, so I guess that Fox News Chiron wasn't exactly right. There is some question there. And so Shannon Bream does kind of bring it up with Senator JD Vance, the vice presidential candidate. But she puts it together in a compound question with a whole bunch of other criticisms of the Trump economic plan. And she lets JD Vance get away with not really answering the question about who pays the tariffs and saying some things that are false, like, well, because Trump did tariffs before and it didn't hurt anyone. Well, it actually hurt American farmers really badly, and he had to give them all this free money so that they wouldn't be mad at him. And that pretty much ate up all the money that came in from the tariffs, and the tariffs were, of course, paid by U.S. consumers. So that at least was explained by Chris Coons on Fox News, but you'll never hear it anywhere else, and certainly not from Shannon Bream here when she's questioning JD Vance in this clip.
I want to give you a chance to respond to some of this back and forth on financial issues. This is what the vice president had to say about what your ticket is planning for America.
He plans to give billionaires massive tax cuts year after year. And he plans to cut corporate taxes by over $1 trillion, even as they pull in record profits. And that's on top of the $2 trillion tax cut he already signed into law when he was president.
She also talked about the plans for tariffs, as you heard Senator Coons talk about. Other economists have said those tariffs, along with mass deportations that would impact the workforce, will also drive up prices for Americans.
Well, Shannon, I don't buy that argument because Donald Trump was already president. He already secured the wall. He already implemented tariffs, which brought back 12,000 American factories were built during Donald Trump's administration, and prices were low and take-home pay was high. The entire argument of the Kamala Harris campaign boils down to forget how good things were when Donald Trump was president. Forget that we had rising take-home pay. Forget that we had low inflation. Forget that we had peace all over the world. And somehow, if you give Kamala Harris more power than she already has, she's somehow going to do something different than she's done for the past 3.5 years, Shannon. The most absurd thing that Kamala says at her rallies is, on day one, I'm going to tackle the food and housing affordability crisis in this country. Shannon, day one for Kamala Harris was 3.5 years ago, and everything that she's done has made the affordability problem worse. We cannot give her more power and more influence. She's just going to do more of the same, which has already made the affordability crisis for Americans very, very real.
Well, we'll see if she presents something that's different or a break with the Biden administration when she speaks here this week. But quickly before we go, I want to touch on foreign policy.
So yeah, you see there that Shannon Bream did no follow-up on the tariff question, didn't really let him get away with saying, oh, the tariffs before didn't hurt anybody, when, of course, they did. It's just like a huge attempt to avoid remembering what the Trump administration actually was like. And, you know, a lot of people have tried to forget COVID and how Trump made that so much worse. And, you know, the whole, are you better off 4 years from now? And anyway, so that was really bad cross-examination from Shannon Bream. And I don't think why didn't she bring up the 20% tax on all imported goods that Chris Coons was talking about, and who pays that? Why didn't she ask that as one specific question instead of that whole big compound question and letting JD Vance get away with not really answering the tariff question? And then finally, before I get to the newsmaker clips and the other, to the news summary, and then the other newsmaker clips, I want to finish off this section with sort of the reverse of what you just saw from Fox News. And this also is about my policy argument that even if Trump gets off of the personal attacks and tries to stick to policy, he's not going to do very well because he doesn't understand policy or explain it very well, as I showed in that first clip. But here is Andy Beshear, governor of Kentucky, explaining Kamala Harris's policy. She did an economic speech, and the thing I kept hearing over and over again on Fox News ever since that speech, you know, every hour, multiple times an hour, is she wants price controls, like Soviet-style price controls, which she actually didn't even, she didn't propose any kind of price controls. She just wants to expand the FTC's antitrust authority to go after food companies that price gouge. And that's not setting a particular price, it's anti-competitive activity. And see, this is CBS News Face the Nation Margaret Brennan asking questions of Governor Andy Beshear about whether it's price controls and whether it's, you know, like in communist countries, as Republicans are claiming. And good questioning from Margaret Brennan, as, you know, sort of taking the oppositional side to Governor Andy Beshear, Democrat, who's the governor of Kentucky. But Andy Beshear actually explains it, and basically wins the policy argument, if you ask me. And I'll ask you what you think in the comment section as we watch that clip together over here.
On the Harris economic plan that you mentioned, there was also this federal ban on price gouging on food and penalties for companies that exploit crises. President Obama's top economist, Jason Furman, was critical, saying the good case scenario is price gouging is a message, not a reality. And the bad case scenario is that this is a real proposal. You'll end up with bigger shortages, less supply, ultimately risk higher prices and worse outcomes for consumers. Do you know how this would work?
I do, because I've been an attorney general just like the vice president. I pursued price gouging statutes and their violations when it comes to the price of gas in Kentucky, and we won and ultimately returned millions of dollars to our people. This isn't about trying to price fix. It's just making sure that the economy is operating the way it should, that this is really supply and demand, which we all respect. It's no different than what Teddy Roosevelt did in breaking up monopolies. It's just making sure we have the right regulations and tools in place to make sure everybody is playing the game fairly and by the rules.
So it sounds like you're just talking about antitrust policy, but which is something JD Vance actually supports. But Republicans, as you know, are accusing Harris of advocating for price controls, like in communist countries where the government sets a price rather than the marketplace. You just said it's not price controls, but can you explain then how you define what an excessive price is if you don't have a benchmark?
Well, first, these are types of statutes that exist in state law. The Texas Attorney General has prosecuted price gouging violations, and I don't think anyone is going to claim that he is into price fixing, and neither is the vice president. This has to be evidence-based. Ultimately, you bring an action, and you have to prove it in court. So you have to have the evidence that this is beyond supply and demand, that this is people taking advantage of us. Certainly, we've seen it after natural disasters in red states and blue states. It's just making sure that coming out of the pandemic or in difficult times that people aren't increasing the price of food just to make a bigger profit. All it is making sure that capitalism stays within the guardrails, and it's not new. We've been doing this in the states for a long time.
So yeah, that was a pretty good explanation of why this isn't Soviet-style price controls or whatever it is I keep hearing on Fox News over and over again. And I think that was an example of how the Democrats can explain their policy, and the Republicans are kind of like hiding from Trump's crazy tariff policy and are just basically lying about it. And so that's why I think that even if Trump stays on message on policy, things are not going well for him in this election. Things are not trending. I mean, it's a tight election. When I say that Kamala Harris is on a path to beating Donald Trump, that it's going to be a tight election all the way to the end, but I think she's mostly got it. And now I want to get to the news summaries here. And, I'm going to go from longest to shortest, and it's actually CBS News Face the Nation had the longest news summary, which I will talk about. And it's, this is basically very similar to the ABC one that focuses on polls. The Fox News one also focuses on the ABC poll. CBS at least has their own poll, and so it's Margaret Brennan and their chief pollster, or whatever his title is, Anthony Salvanto, talking about how it's a tight race, but things are trending Kamala Harris's way over in this clip.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. On the eve of the Democratic National Convention, our CBS News poll continues to show a very tight race in the 2024 presidential race. Vice President Kamala Harris is 3 points ahead of former President Donald Trump nationwide. But in those 7 key battleground states, which could go either way, the race is a dead heat. Joining us with more is CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Good to see you here, Anthony.
Good morning.
So what do voters tell you is most important heading into a pretty unusual Democratic convention?
So let's start by reminding everybody how we got here to what this is only can be described as a very close race. In fact, remember, the national vote doesn't decide the presidency. It's those battleground states. And if you unpack that and look at our estimates in each of those individual battlegrounds, what you see is close race after close race. That is because After Kamala Harris became the likely nominee, we saw a boost in Democratic enthusiasm. More Democrats saying that they were going to show up to vote. That boosts her poll numbers, and that continues to this day. We now see Democrats matching Republicans on that expressed likelihood to turn out. So when you watch the convention, look for them to try to keep that enthusiasm up. That's number one. Number two, on your question about defining Kamala Harris. So you see a third of voters say they still don't know exactly what she stands for.
Interesting.
Interesting, but maybe not surprising, right? Because this is all so new, this reset race. Well, that's part of the defining the space in which that contest within the contest to define her is going to be fought. And the other part, I think, on that is, how similar or different is she to Joe Biden? Because Joe Biden was trailing in this race, right? But Democrats still like him. So we ask people, how similar is she? And the bulk of voters say they think she's mostly similar in policies and views to Joe Biden, but not exactly similar. And she does better among the mostly group. So that's that balancing act that Democrats are going to have going into the convention as well, Margaret.
Now, I know you've been looking at the growing gender gap. So does having a female at the top of the Democratic ticket now make a difference for women voters?
Well, I think it's going to be a hallmark of this race. So it's more women voting for Harris, more men voting for Trump. But the key thing is the why. First of all, you see more women feeling that Kamala Harris will be someone who fights for people like them than men say that. Men say that more about Donald Trump. That's number one. Number two, you look at the broader views on how people see the push for gender equality in the U.S. When people say it's going too far, they vote for Donald Trump. When people say it hasn't gone far enough, and especially among women, they're overwhelmingly voting for Harris. And then number three, look at that key issue of the economy. There's a couple of things here. One is that Harris trails Trump on the economy, on inflation, on the border, all key important issues. But among women voters, she does a little better on the economy and better than Joe Biden was doing. So women are giving her a little more benefit of the doubt on that. And I think that starts to show you if the Democrats can start to close that gap with Donald Trump on those key issues, that's probably where they start.
You mentioned the border. How much of a challenge is it going to be for Kamala Harris to overcome some of that doubt?
Well, this is important because for all the movement we've talked about in this race, the things that haven't changed, the border remains to the advantage of Donald Trump. More voters think that it would be his policies that would slow or stop border crossings. And then you look at Harris's connection to what people think the administration has done so far, and they see her as somewhat tied to it, but not necessarily a lot. Again, that's part of that space in which they'll be trying to define what's her record been and where would she be going forward. Another key issue, but I got to emphasize this, abortion, because that's something you're going to see the Democrats press a lot. And it also relates, of course, back to the gender gap and the women's vote. Harris has an advantage on abortion. Democrats have 3/4 of women who think abortion should be legal say they're voting for her. So I think that's something, again, that you want to press. And it's that fight to define which issues are most important. And that's certainly one the Democrats are going to press.
Fascinating. Anthony Salvanto, thank you.
Thank you.
And we go now to Arizona Senator Mark Kelly. He joins us.
Oh, don't have a clip of Mark Kelly. If you want to see which clips I have, down in the video description, by the way, there are short summaries of all 12 clips. Also down there is the source of all the clips. That was a pretty good news summary. And, you know, normally I criticize the networks when their top story is their own poll, because polls are just like snapshots in time. And especially this far out before Labor Day. I mean, it's getting close. A few more weeks and the polls are actually going to start to matter. But it don't matter so much for the registered voters. It should be more likely voters. And I still think, though, that I said this last week, I think that the polls are more important now than they used to be, or than they normally would be. They're more because the polls are one of the things that help convince Biden to drop out. And now we're trying to see how did that change affect a race that was trending towards Donald Trump, according to the polls. And so I guess the polls did have some importance there, and they're telling us kind of, I mean, like the title of my video, that Kamala Harris is on her path to beating Donald Trump. And this next news summary is the Fox News Sunday one. They have Shannon Bream and Jacqui Heinrich kind of doing the same thing. Well, they start off with like the best numbers for Trump. They put those up front so that people aren't too scared. Like his numbers on immigration, and he's beating Kamala Harris on the economy, and their Fox News power rankings, whatever that means. They don't really explain what power rankings are. I guess it's some kind of issue. It's like the issue difference taken from their poll, I'm assuming, but they don't explain. And then they go right into Jacqui Heinrich doing the ABC Ipsos poll that ABC's going to report on in the next news summary, where Kamala Harris is doing really well. And anyway, and then there's actually a second reporter to do a news story from Israel. Trey Yingst is still in Israel. I'm not going to show that report. It's too, and I feel bad I showed it the last 2 weeks because Trey Yingst was there, and like it was Israel bracing for attack from Iran for 2 weeks. It was like 2 weeks ago, and then still bracing for attack from Iran last week. Now, no attack from Iran. So they like reported on news that didn't happen. And that's why I cut it out this week, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the Fox News Sunday news summary together over here.
Hello from the United Center in Chicago, where Democrats will launch their national convention tomorrow. We have brand new Fox News power rankings out this hour, and they show a tightening presidential race on key issues that matter most to voters. Donald Trump still leads on the economy and immigration, but Kamala Harris has gained ground on those issues since rising to the top of the ticket, and she's built up more voter support for her positions on abortion. Donald Trump's lead on the economy is now just 8 points, a 7-point shift in Harris's direction over where it was with President Biden. That tightening backed up in new polls from several key outlets. In a moment, we will get reaction from Harris-Walz campaign national co-chair Senator Chris Coons and Donald Trump's running mate, Senator JD Vance. But first, we turn to Fox News senior White House correspondent Jacqui Heinrich here with us in the United Center. Good to see you in person.
Great to be with you, Shannon. It is so hard to believe it was just 4 weeks ago today that the president ended his bid for a second term. And now he's at Camp David, putting the final touches on a speech urging voters to bring the momentum behind his vice president to the finish line. A New York Times Siena College poll shows Kamala Harris's candidacy put 4 Sunbelt swing states back in play for Democrats. Harris now leading Trump among likely voters in Arizona and North Carolina, and also closing Trump's lead in Georgia and Nevada, consolidating support where Biden was slipping among young, non-white and female voters. But Trump still edges out Harris on the economy. In Pennsylvania Saturday, he branded her plans as too liberal.
This is communist, this is Marxist, this is fascist. But you know what? It's dangerous because she's saying that she's going to give away things that she'll never be able to get approved.
The most controversial pillar of Harris's plan, unveiled in North Carolina on Friday, expanding the authority of the FTC to crack down on corporate food price gouging while propping up smaller shops.
As Attorney General in California, I went after companies that illegally increased prices, including wholesalers that inflated the price of prescription medication. I won more than $1 billion for consumers. So believe me, as president, I will go after the bad actors.
Critics, though, panned it as a poor solution to a problem not caused by corporate greed, but big government spending and excessive regulation. But Trump veered from the issues.
Look, people say, be nice. Have you heard her laugh? That is the laugh of a crazy person. You don't mind if I go off teleprompter for a second, do you? Joe Biden hates her. This was an overthrow of a president.
While Trump campaigns in Pennsylvania on Monday, President Biden is not the main event here at the DNC. His speech is opening night, set to frame the end of his race as a sacrifice for democracy under threat from Trump. But tributes around the convention center will make for a bittersweet handoff to the president whose own election was marred by the pandemic.
We didn't get to have a traditional style convention for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. It's like a big family reunion.
So Biden will speak on the opening day of the convention and then leave town. The White House is framing that as a symbolic changing of the guard, but there are also reports that he is not keen to thaw relationships with the party heavyweights who pushed him to end his race. Trump and Vance will spend the rest of the week stumping in Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina, and Arizona.
So we got a little bit of the economic plan from the vice president on Friday. Do you sense that we'll get sort of more meat on the bones policy stuff from her this week? Or do you think we're going to stick to the themes that are positive and uplifting and stick with the momentum?
I think this is going to be light on policy and heavy on navigating what's a really sensitive handoff from a convention that would have been Biden's 4 weeks ago, and trying to get that support, that united front, and drive that energy through November.
Yeah, this summer's one for the history books.
It is.
Glad we're along together to cover it for folks.
Thanks,
Good to see you,
Shannon.
Jacqui. Thanks. All right, now to the Middle East, where negotiators may finally be inching closer to a ceasefire deal after 10 long months of war in Gaza. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is there in Israel this weekend, where we find Fox News chief foreign correspondent Trey Yanks.
And yeah, as I explained, I'm not going to show the Trey Yanks report. I do have Cheech here. I thought you all might like to see a little live Cheech the kitten here. I do have a bonus Cheech and Chong the kittens clip to end the program with. But I think you saw a lot of that Fox News bias I was talking about before I... hold on, let me put Cheech down. He's tangled up in my earpiece. So yeah, the one thing I noticed is after all that explanation that what Kamala Harris proposed is not price controls, what was the Fox News Sunday chyron there? Harris unveils price control proposal. So that's dishonest. I also like the way Jacqui Heinrich introduced what Donald Trump was saying. Donald Trump accused Kamala Harris of proposal of being liberal, and they cut to Donald Trump saying she's communist, fascist, Marxist. I don't think you can be communist, fascist, and Marxist well, I guess you could be communist and Marxist, but throwing in the fascist there, he's just like coming up with all the bad adjectives he can come up with, and I don't know if that's really, I don't think what he did was call her plan too liberal. I mean, I guess he did, but went way beyond that. They try their best to make Trump look better, though at least in that clip you saw that Jacqui Heinrich mentioned that he was not staying on message, and he was supposed to stay on message. That Fox News is actually sending that message to Trump as much as they can. Like, please try to stay more on message. Stop with the personal attacks. And anyway, I'm going to show you the next news summary now is the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary. This is the host Martha Raddatz and their political director Rick Klein talking about that ABC Ipsos poll, where at least if you poll all adults, which is like the worst people to poll, it's worse than registered voters, and registered voters is worse than likely voters. But at least on all adults, there's only a plus or minus 2% margin of error in the ABC Ipsos poll, and Kamala Harris is winning by 5. So that's outside the margin of error if you look at all adults, which doesn't mean much, but it means something. And it kind of shows the trend that I was talking about before. And I'll talk about the news summary a little more, which you can juxtapose with the last two after we watch it. Too much fluff from Cheech here. After we watch this clip together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. We are live from the United Center in Chicago, where in just a few days, Vice President Kamala Harris will stand on the stage behind me as the Democratic nominee for president. It is a far different convention than the one planned just 1 month ago when President Joe Biden was still on the ticket, and many Democrats were concerned about a potential Donald Trump landslide in November. But what a difference a candidate makes. Our new poll with the Washington Post and Ipsos out this morning shows some dramatic shifts in the race for the White House in the 4 weeks since President Biden stepped aside, with Harris now opening up a 5-point lead nationally over Trump among all adults. Compare that to early July when Trump led Biden by a point. A spike in voter enthusiasm is helping to drive Harris's momentum, but Trump does lead on several major issues like the economy and immigration. Our political director and Washington bureau chief Rick Klein is here with the breakdown of what this race looks like on the eve of the Democratic National Convention. Good to see you this morning, Rick. What a change.
Yeah, Martha, as you mentioned, that lead that Donald Trump had has been entirely erased and even turned around in Kamala Harris's direction in just the last couple of weeks. Harris now leading Trump by 5 points among all adults in our polling and 4 points among registered voters. Of course, that's still a close race, particularly when you think about the battleground states where this race remains in that kind of range of the mid-single digits. But when you dive into the voting groups that are driving this election, you see an even more dramatic change of what's happened over the last month or so. Joe Biden was leading younger adults by 2 points. It's now Harris plus 20. Among black voters, Biden was leading by a healthy 60, while Harris is up 72 among black voters, an 8-point jump among Hispanic voters. And this is a big one. Independent voters, it was Trump leading by 4 in our last poll. Now it is Harris up 11. That is a major, major turnaround from just a couple of weeks ago.
A major turnaround indeed. And we know voters' concerns about Biden were driven by his age and his ability to perform the job, as well as those most pressing issues. How's that changed?
Yeah, this was a big drag on the Democratic ticket. Everyone knew it, and everyone who's going to be in this arena the rest of the week was worried about that dynamic. Well, Donald Trump is now the oldest presidential nominee ever, and it shows in the polling. Voters are picking up on that. They saw Donald Trump as in better physical health than Joe Biden by a 31-point edge. Now it's Harris plus 30, totally reversed, 100% in the opposite direction. They saw Trump as having better mental sharpness by 30 points. Now it's Harris, 9 points advantaged in that area, and they're about the same when it comes to the trust on honesty and trustworthy. Harris and Biden about where they were. And Martha, all of this is translated into voter enthusiasm. The number of Harris voters who say they are enthusiastic about her candidacy, 60%. That's the same as Donald Trump. Contrast that to the numbers back in July where Trump had an enormous advantage when it comes to voter enthusiasm. Now, the issue set, this is one area where Harris may have some bigger problems to overcome, and this week may be critical for all of that. You see on areas like health care and abortion, you have an edge for Kamala Harris in terms of the trust to handle those issues. But for Donald Trump, he's got an edge in the areas that tend to matter even more to voters, up 9 on trust and handling the economy, 3 on crime and safety, and then 10 points on immigration and handling the southern border. That's a lot of the reason why you hear Trump allies say focus on the issues. And it's one reason we're going to hear a lot from Harris and her allies this week. It's time to look forward. They don't want to own everything that Biden is associated with. They want to do their own thing and be associated with things on issues that voters are in a better comfort zone on.
Still a lot of challenges there for the Democrats, Rick. And as you know, these new poll results reflect not just numbers, but people. We saw that firsthand visiting 3 critical battleground states this week, driving more than 1,000 miles across Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin to hear directly from voters, their voices very much backing up what the pollsters heard.
From the moment.
And then ABC goes into this, like, talking to voters in the 3 Rust Belt swing states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And I always find those to be way too subjective. Like, how can you pick out? They talk to, what, like 10 people and at most, and those 10 people are supposed to represent all the voters in those 3 swing states. I mean, the poll is much better. And I like the way that Rick Klein talked about some of the crosstabs in that ABC Ipsos poll. Especially, this is like kind of devastating for Trump here. This one screenshot of the different demographic groups or demographic and then the independents, how the Harris putting in Kamala Harris instead of Joe Biden has totally switched the race around. That's why if things keep going the way they're going, Kamala Harris is on a path to beat Donald Trump. Looks like a very close election, but everything is trending towards Kamala Harris for the whole last month, basically. And speaking of the whole last month, my next news summary is NBC News Meet the Press's news summary, and they've been gone for over a month for the Olympics, which you'll see at the very beginning of this news summary. Kristen Welker tries to gloss over by saying after a brief pause for the Olympics, we're back. And then they have to explain like everything that's happened since they left. I think they left the Sunday right after the assassination attempt on Trump. So they missed Kamala Harris, Biden dropping out, Kamala Harris uniting the party, and her ascension, and then Trump struggling to adjust to the new opponent. And that's all kind of summarized in this in the news summary. I guess that's why they call it a news summary. But I had to laugh when I saw brief pause for the Olympics. You were gone for a month, and it's not like it was a slow news month. It was not a slow news month, and NBC should not. If they're going to say if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press, as I point out all the time, then if it's Sunday, it should be Meet the Press. But it was Sunday yesterday, and it was Meet the Press, and they tried to wriggle out of their shame over in this clip.
Good Sunday morning. As we come on the air after a brief pause for the Olympics, the race for the White House has dramatically shifted, with Vice President Harris now at the top of the ticket. She has reset the race and the electoral map, and tomorrow night all eyes will be on Chicago as the Democratic National Convention gets underway.
We are running a campaign on behalf of all Americans. And when elected, we will govern on behalf of all Americans.
A month ago, President Biden trailed former President Donald Trump nationally and in key battleground states. But now Harris has narrowed the gap with Mr. Trump nationally and is leading or tied with him in 6 out of 7 battleground states. That's according to the Cook Political Report, within the margin of error. The New York Times Siena College battleground poll confirms a highly competitive presidential race in the Sunbelt states of Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and North Carolina. Just a month ago, just a third of Democrats were satisfied with Biden as their nominee. Now, in a CNBC poll, 81% of Democrats say they feel that way about Harris. The volatility in the election has benefited Harris, but now the race is on to define her. How much will her presidency be a continuation of Biden's policies? And where will she break from him? We may get more answers on Thursday night. For his part, Mr. Trump has struggled to adjust to the change in the race. He was once winning, allies urging him to stay focused on policy differences. Instead, he has often veered into personal attacks.
The most unpopular vice president in the history of our country. And then they decided to get politically correct. We have to put her in. They put her in. She's not smart. She's not intelligent. And we've gone through enough of that with this guy, Crooked Joe. This woman is nuts. Look, people say, be nice. Have you heard her laugh? That is the laugh of a crazy person. That is the laugh of a crazy. It's the laugh of a lunatic.
Some Republicans, including former rival Nikki Haley, are warning Mr. Trump to stay on message.
The campaign is not going to win talking about crowd sizes. It's not going to win talking about what race Kamala Harris is. It's not going to win talking about whether she's dumb. It's not. You can't win on those things. The American people are smart. Treat them like they're smart.
Stop questioning the size of her crowds and start questioning her position when it comes to what did she do as Attorney General on crime. Question what did she do when she was supposed to take care of the border as a czar.
The winning formula for President Trump is very plain to see. It's fewer insults, more insights, and that policy contrast.
In a press conference on Thursday, Mr. Trump fired back.
I think I'm entitled to personal attacks. I don't have a lot of respect for her. I don't have a lot of respect for her intelligence. And I think she'll be a terrible president. And I think it's very important that we win. And whether the personal attacks are good, bad, I mean, she certainly attacks me personally. She actually called me weird. Some people say, oh, why don't you be nice? But they're not nice to me. They want to put me in prison.
Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, a co-chair of Harris's campaign, is expected to speak this week in Chicago. Whitmer is out with a new memoir, True Gretch, What I've Learned About Life, Leadership, and Everything in Between. And Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer joins me now.
So yeah, that was the news summary. Other than the introductory part about the brief pause for the Olympics, it was not a bad news summary. And you saw that Nikki Haley clip you're going to see in the next two, in the first two Newsmaker clips I'm going to show after the final news summary from Jake Tapper. Kevin McCarthy also there as the voice of reason. Trump has to stay on message, has to stick to policy. That it's not, and Nikki Haley, not crowd size, not that she's dumb, not well. Anyway, you'll see that clip again, and I'm trying to make the argument with what I started the program with, that even if he does stick to policy, he's not doing well. He's not good at policy. And personal attacks don't help him. He's entitled to personal attacks, apparently, though. I don't even know what that means, but why is he entitled to personal attacks? Maybe someone in the comment section can explain that to me. But I want to finish the news summary here with Jake Tapper on CNN State of the Union, where I think he does a good job of using the shortest news summary to point out something very important, that this path to victory that I'm talking about, there are multiple paths to victory. Joe Biden had one really narrow path: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, those three Rust Belt states. But Kamala Harris, because of the way she's getting more enthusiasm in the Democrats' base, the young Hispanic Black voters, that I was talking about in that ABC Ipsos poll earlier, that's opened up a whole Sun Belt. She has a Sun Belt path to victory as well. So she has multiple paths to victory, as Jake Tapper points out in the final news summary I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper at the Union Center in Chicago, site of the Democratic National Convention, where the State of Our Union is rebooting. Tomorrow, right here, Democrats will kick off their 4-day convention to officially make Vice President Kamala Harris their party nominee and lean into the optimism Democrats feel about her candidacy with the theme, quote, "for the people, for our future," unquote. A major national poll out this morning shows Harris with a narrow lead over Trump outside the poll's margin of error for the very first time since she entered the race 4 weeks ago today. And a brand new CNN analysis finds a new potential path to victory for the Democrats through the Sun Belt states of Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia. Right behind me this week, Harris will try to build on her momentum in what is basically a neck-and-neck race, with remarks by top Democrats from Barack Obama to Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and President Biden, who will appear with Harris on stage tomorrow night at a much different convention than was originally planned for him. While Donald Trump tries to keep some of the spotlight on himself this week with his own events. Last night at a rally in Pennsylvania, he made numerous personal attacks against Harris, which we'll get into later, but he did also make some policy arguments that perhaps some voters may find persuasive.
She says she's going to lower the cost of food and housing starting on day one. But day one for Kamala was 3.5 years ago. So why didn't she do it then?
Joining me now, Democratic leader of the House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries.
I don't have a Hakeem Jeffries clip, but I do have 3 newsmaker clips coming up. After that was the last of the news summaries. I showed some newsmaker clips before the news summaries, which I don't normally do, but I wanted to juxtapose the Chris Coons, JD Vance, and Andy Beshear. So that's right, the third one, Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky. And they're talking about the economic policy to bolster my argument that even if Trump does stick to policy, he's still not very good at policy, and he's not going to win that argument. The more he talks policy, the worse he does, the worse people see him on those policies. Kamala Harris, I think, even if that whole anti-price gouging thing it has to be passed by Congress first of all, so that makes it kind of unlikely. And and you saw the Washington Post and some other economists say it's probably not going to work very well. But honestly, that's more of it's not really a political question, it's a policy question. Maybe it isn't that great a policy, but it's a good policy to advocate for while you're running for election. That's the thing, that for people who aren't looking at the details, she's just saying, I'm going to go after the people who are raising the prices. At least she's saying something, how she's going to go after the people who are raising the prices. So it's a good talking point, and I think it moves the gap between her and Donald Trump on the economy it shortens that gap, makes them closer. I think she's gaining on it just by making a good speech on economic issues while Trump is, well, you saw what Trump is doing. Now I'm going to show two Republicans reacting to that Nikki Haley clip about how Trump has to stop talking about crowd size and that Kamala Harris is dumb and whether or not she's black, and stick to the issues, even though I don't think sticking to the issues is really going to help them. That's why Kamala Harris is on a path to victory. But here's Lindsey Graham explaining why he thinks there is a way Trump could do it over in this clip.
Let's start with some of the concerns that former President Trump's allies have had about him not staying on message in the way that he is talking about his new rival, Vice President Kamala Harris. Here's what Nikki Haley had to say about that. Take a look.
The campaign is not going to win talking about crowd sizes. It's not going to win talking about what race Kamala Harris is. It's not going to win talking about whether she's dumb. It's not, you can't win on those things. I think the campaign needs to focus. That's the main thing. Look, this is a winnable election, but you need to focus.
Senator, do you agree with Nikki Haley's assessment?
Yeah, I don't think, I don't look at Vice President Harris as a lunatic. I look at her as the most liberal person to ever be nominated for president in the history of the United States. She's going to the Soviet Union playbook to lower prices called price control. She wants to eliminate private health care. She's for reparations. She's against fracking. She's for the Green New Deal. On and on and on. So I would make it about policy. A nightmare for Harris is to defend her policy choices. Every day we're not talking about her policy choices as vice president, and what she would do as president is a good day for her and a bad day for us.
And of course, her campaign has said she's actually not opposed to fracking. But the broader question here,
right.
Senator Graham,
how can you be for the Green New Deal? Wait a minute. How can you be for the Green New Deal and not be opposed to fracking?
Well,
that's BS.
Okay.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Let me ask you, big picture, bottom line me here. Do you think former President Trump should stop talking about Vice President Harris's race and intelligence?
Yeah, I think, in my view, is that me and Nikki need to go to Georgia. We're giving advice on TV to President Trump. He's got a lot of critics. He's got a lot of advisors. But to Nikki Haley and DeSantis and Youngkin and all these great people we have, let's get together and actually campaign for the guy rather than just give advice. But in the advice-giving column, here's what I would say. President Trump can win this election. His policies are good for America, and if you have a policy debate for president, he wins. Donald Trump, the provocateur, the showman, may not win this election. So I'm looking for President Trump to show up in the last 80 days to define what he will do for our country, to fix broken borders, to lower inflation. The numbers that Americans are living with under Harris-Biden are terrible. 50% increase in gas prices, mortgage rates going through the roof, grocery costs are really high. That's what I would focus on. Policy. Yeah. Policy is the key to the White House.
All right, let's talk policy. Of course, we did get new inflation numbers.
So that is Lindsey Graham claiming that if Trump would only talk about policy, that he would be doing better in this race. But has he ever watched Trump talk about policy when he stays on message? I mean, I showed him talking about tariffs and taxes. There were some, of course, some personal attacks thrown in there too, but the very first clip I showed was him talking about policy, and he's just not very good at it, and he doesn't really understand it, and I don't think it's going to save him, but you can let me know what you think, and I'll show you one more, Lindsey Graham is a more moderate Republican, I guess. That's kind of the sad state of the Republican Party. Another one, Governor Chris Sununu, who actually supported Nikki Haley, was over on CNN State of the Union, and Jake Tapper asked basically the same question, showing the Nikki Haley clip and can Trump stay on message. Oh, did you notice Lindsey Graham apparently can't say the word provocateur? I don't know. I make so many mistakes on my live streams. I guess not being able to pronounce one word during a live interview is probably not the worst mistake anyone ever made. But thinking that Trump can focus on policy or that it would help him if he did, that is kind of a big mistake if you've been watching Donald Trump over the last 10 years, almost 10 years that he's been on the political scene. That's what I think. And let's see Chris Sununu try to convince me otherwise or fail to convince me otherwise. You can let me know what you think after we watch that last Republican clip together over here.
You heard her laugh? That is the laugh of a crazy person. As soon as she laughs, the election's over. I'm a better looking person than Kamala. It was a coup of a president. This was a coup, and they stole the presidency of the United States from him.
Welcome back to State of the Union. Donald Trump there veering off his economic remarks at a rally in Pennsylvania last night. Joining us now, Trump supporter and the Republican governor of the great state of New Hampshire, Chris Sununu. Former President Trump attacking Vice President Harris. Former Governor Nikki Haley, whom you supported for president, had some advice for Trump about the best way to campaign against Harris. Take a listen to that and then take a listen to what Trump said this week.
One thing Republicans have to stop doing, quit whining about her. The campaign is not going to win talking about crowd sizes. It's not going to win talking about what race Kamala Harris is. It's not going to win talking about whether she's dumb. It's not, you can't win on those things.
I think I'm entitled to personal attacks. I don't have a lot of respect for her. I don't have a lot of respect for her intelligence, and I think she'll be a terrible president.
Who's right here, Haley or Trump?
Well, it is a Donald Trump in this case. Look, as Nikki, probably wouldn't point out because she was the alternative. Almost any other Republican candidate would be winning this race by 10 points. And so the message is very clear. If you stick to the issues, if you stick to what matters, this should be an easy race for Donald Trump. It really should. The delta that you're seeing right now is Trump does better with males by about 10 points, but where this giant shift in August has come is with the female voter. Frank Luntz pointed this out in his polling. He's down 10, 12 points at least with females, and they're going to come out in much bigger numbers than they previously would have if Biden were the candidate. If you talk about these economic issues, if you talk about, remind folks that he's running against the most liberal and most unpopular vice president in history that has now laid out the worst economic plan ever laid out by a Democrat candidate. Even Obama's team is panning this as a disaster for America. So she then picked her own vice presidential candidate, which is also one of the most liberal progressive governors in the country that has huge issues in terms of supporting public safety. All of these things are lining up for a huge Republican win. He's got to deliver. And we've all showed him exactly that playbook to do so. If he can get it together in the last 60 days, he can. And remind folks that as individuals, they're more important than the government. This Democrat administration, Harris's administration, right? She's not new to this game. She's been there for almost 4 years, has really tried to dominate with a big government solution. It hasn't worked, right? So if he sticks to what matters, he sticks to what made this country great, he can be very successful in November.
It sounds like you think it's going to be harder for Trump to beat Vice President Harris than it would have been for him to beat President Biden.
Oh, sure. No, there's no doubt about that because, she was able to kind of establish this resurgence, and her team has done a very good job of kind of avoiding the issues, trying to make people believe that she hasn't been there for 4 years, and they've done a very good job of that at the same time kind of capitalizing on Trump's reaction, right? They knew that the former president can be a very reactionary person, and I saw that clip that you just played. Trump can say, look, I'm entitled to be, to personal attacks. Nobody cares what you're entitled to. Do what you have to do to get the votes and win. This is an election. It's about delivering those votes, talking to those independent voters, especially those moms, those suburban females that typically wouldn't have come out strong for Biden. You got to get them back on the team. There's time to do it because they care about the economy. This whole idea that inflation was driven by price gouging, that's a bunch of nonsense, that the government's going to control prices to solve it. I just heard Hakeem Jeffries say that her plan is the American way. It's one of the most un-American plans that has ever been proposed. Free markets, entrepreneurship, competitiveness. Her plan would crush all of that, right? So let's do those things that got us out of economic slumps in the 80s and in the 60s. We have a record of success doing it the right way, not with government controls.
At an event this week, former President Trump compared giving the Presidential Medal of Freedom to top Republican donor.
Sorry, I'm trying to show you Chong here. Chong came to visit, but he is tired of being up here. He's very cute. Oh, he wants to get down. Okay. So you got to see live Cheech and live Chong, and then I'll have their bonus Cheech and Chong, the kittens clip at the end after one more newsmaker clip. I don't know, did Chris Sununu there convince you that Trump would do better if he stayed on message? Does he really think he would? I kind of criticized the clip, but you also saw there at the end that Jake Tapper was asking a follow-up question about another way Trump didn't stay on message. He went and talked to a Jewish group recently and just made this gratuitous off-message comment that really angered a lot of veterans. Veterans of foreign wars came out and said his comment was asinine, which is what Jake Tapper was just about to ask Governor Chris Sununu about. I wanted to show how over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, Martha Raddatz had Senator Tammy Duckworth on, who was someone who actually was seriously injured as in combat and is now a senator, and asks her about that question, about that comment from Donald Trump where he went off message and really denigrated people who get the Congressional Medal of Honor versus people who get the Congressional Medal of Freedom that the president hands out. And you'll see the clip, Senator Duckworth's response. But then Martha Raddatz kind of does the fair and balanced thing, shows that it's not liberal media, and asks a follow-up question about a controversy about Governor Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's vice presidential pick, something he said. Looks like he kind of misspoke about carrying weapons in war instead of weapons of war. He over and over again talked about how he carried weapons of war, and then one time said weapons in war. And anyway, you can see Tammy Duckworth's response to both of those in the final newsmaker clip we'll watch together over here.
I also want to ask you about what former President Trump said Thursday at an event. He was talking about awarding Miriam Adelson, a major donor of his, the Presidential Medal of Freedom while he was in office. Let's listen.
It's the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor, but civilian version. It's actually much better because everyone gets the Congressional Medal of Honor, that's soldiers. They're either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets, or they're dead. She gets it, and she's a healthy, beautiful woman. It's right. And they're rated equal.
They're rated equal. As an Iraq War veteran, badly wounded there, recipient of a Purple Heart, what's your reaction to those words?
Well, American voters have a chance to choose. Do they want a 5-time draft dodger who denigrates military men and women and our veterans and calls us suckers and losers? Who doesn't want to have his picture taken with amputee veterans of various conflicts to be the next commander-in-chief? Or are you going to have Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who care deeply about veterans? Tim Walz has been out there leading on so many issues for veterans, especially burn pits. Donald Trump is despicable. He doesn't deserve to be commander-in-chief, and certainly those remarks are consistent with where he's always been. He thinks that we're suckers and losers, and frankly, he's not fit to be commander-in-chief.
You talk about Tim Walz, but there's been controversy about his military service as well, saying once that he carried weapons in war, which he did not, and he said he misspoke. But an ABC News found at least one occasion where he didn't correct an interviewer who said that Walz had served in Afghanistan. Do you have any problems with that? Should he have corrected him?
Well, you know, when you speak, oftentimes you say things, but remember, this man served 24 years in uniform. He's a retired command sergeant major. I'm excited to have a retired command sergeant major in the vice president's office, in the Situation Room, when we look at issues of conflicts around the world. It's going to be great to have that experience. And frankly, it's despicable what Republicans are doing. The same party that thinks that Donald Trump, who dodged the draft 5 times, who thinks veterans are suckers and losers, that's who they think is better than someone who served 24 years in uniform, protecting and defending us every single day. And frankly, I don't have a single problem with Tim Walz. He is, in fact, somebody that I think will be very good for America to have in the Situation Room with his vast military experience.
Okay, thanks so much, Senator. It's great.
So kudos there to Senator Tammy Duckworth for capitalizing on the awful statement that Donald Trump made about Congressional Medal of Honor. I mean, and putting it in the context of all the other terrible things he said about veterans. And she's also a great spokesperson for that particular talking point. And I don't know who was in charge of getting her out on one of the Sunday shows to make that point, but that was really good messaging from the Democrats there. And the Kamala Harris campaign is basically making no mistakes so far, and on a path to victory. Like I was saying, that doesn't mean 100% chance that she's going to win, but if the momentum and the dynamics of the race stay the way they are right now, if nothing changes them, close race, but definitely favors Kamala Harris. And I think I've shown that with all of the clips that I gave you today. I hope you appreciate the time and effort I put into picking out the clips, adding my media criticism and political commentary. I'll be back next Monday and every Monday all the way through the inauguration of whoever actually does end up winning the election. Hopefully the same person who won the election will be the person who's inaugurated in January, but that's why I'm going to keep going to January just to make sure. And anyway, before I finish the show, I did promise a bonus Cheech and Chong the kittens clip. I tried to take video of them, but for some reason they really like the camera, and I can't keep them away from the camera, which you can see both from Cheech and Chong in the bonus kitten clip for today over here. And so there you see, they both get their extreme close-ups. I don't know why they like that. I guess they don't even know it's a camera, right? So I can't really accuse them of trying to get the extreme close-up. But anyway, that's the show for today. I'll see you next Monday. Or if I have a reason to upload some other video, maybe I will this week. It's kind of a tough week this week, but maybe. You never know. It might happen. So unless I have some other reason to upload a video, I'll see you next Monday, and until then, I guess I'll just be seeing all of you around the internet.